Good morning. I'm Carol Dixon with the Idaho Federation of Health. I'd like to welcome you to our April parent webinar. This morning we have Angela Lindig. She's the Executive Director of Unlimited, and she's presenting on parent and professional collaboration. I know it's going to be really valuable information as so many parents are working with professionals in schools, communities. So to just provide a lot of information about how to enhance those relationships, get the most out of the services and the things that you need for your children. First, a couple of things we want to remind you that there is a chat box. If you have some questions or some comments you would like to make, we will share those with Angela at the end of the presentation. So please, kind of as we go along, you're welcome to write them into the chat box, and I'll make sure she gets that information. And I also want to let you know in May we have our parent webinar, which is going to be our third annual Jeff D / Yes Youth Empowerment Services panel, where we will be discussing kind of what the new developments are with the YES program. And we on that panel, we will be having Howard Beladoff join us, who was the original attorney from the Jeff D settlement dating back to 1980, Pat Martell, who is the project manager from the Department of Health and Welfare Division of Behavioral Health. And then we have two parents, Vanessa Morgan and Linda Miller, who have been very involved in the development of YES. So that will be on the first Tuesday of the month, and I'm going to say that's June 2nd. So please write that on your calendar and plan us to join us for that one. So with that, Angela, I'm going to ask you to kind of give your talk. Know what you all are doing.
So, Idaho Parents Unlimited is our contact what I'm talking about a lot how so but I before I start talking why why I have a lot that So the first thing we're going to do is define okay, define stop. Sorry. Okay. I need contacts to drive. Right. So then, so with my contact, now it's lovely. Right. So uh, yeah, they do. Although it seems like I might struggle with it's. I have a pair of bifocal sunglasses that have readers on them, and so those are hard to drive in because if you look, you know, you can get the blur a little bit, but you get used to it. But um, yes, I'm sharing the agenda. I think we're on slide 2 when we come back. And is that are you able to see the agenda there? Yes, on the agenda slide.
Did you
So we don't think anybody heard anything? Mike, is that the case? Okay, I'm going to start over. Hi. Sorry, everyone. I think we had some technical difficulties, and I think we're gonna just start from the beginning. And I apologize if you were watching me talk and you heard nothing. So I'm just going to start over and introduce myself, and forgive me if you get to hear this twice. But I'm Angela Lindig, and I'm the executive director at Idaho Parents Unlimited. Idaho Parents Unlimited is the statewide parent training and information center and the family to family health information center for families who have children with disabilities and special health care needs And we serve families who have kids from birth to adulthood, age 26, throughout our entire state. Everything that we do for families is always free. We never ever want a barrier for families to access the information, supports, or resources that they're looking for to improve their lives with their kids. So our contact information is at the end of this presentation on the final slide, and you are welcome to call our office with any question or issues that you might be having with your kids, or if you are a professional. We do a lot of collaborative work with professionals, which is a perfect segue into what I'm talking about today, and that is parent and professional collaboration with a focus on transition to adulthood. And we offer this training with a couple of different focus areas, including family engagement and just general parent and professional collaboration. So there will be quite a bit of discussion around dealing with collaborating together, especially in schools. And even though we're going to be talking about transition to adulthood, we're going to be talking about all what leads up to transition. So this is not a presentation that would just be geared towards parents who are already in that process, but certainly it can be for any parent that is just looking for strategies to collaborate better with professionals, in particular teachers, and then also for professionals who are seeking strategies to collaborate with parents and engage families. So we'll talk about all of that. A background on me. If I've already said this and you heard it, I apologize. If you didn't hear it, then I feel that it's important to share my background in that I am a parent who is in the transition process with all three of my kids who have disabilities and special health care needs. So my oldest daughter is 21 years old, and today is her final IEP I will be at this afternoon, which is quite a milestone in our lives as she has reached that point of adulthood. She's wrapping up her 18 to 21 program today, well, in May, but today's that last meeting as we prepare for her future as an adult. And then I have a 19-year-old who is wrapping up his sophomore year at the University of Idaho and doing very well. So he's well on his way to achieving success and developing his future and career, et cetera. And then I have a 17-year-old who will be graduating from Boise High School in May, and she's preparing for her future to go to college at LCSC in the fall. So it's an exciting time for us, but and for them. And I'm hoping that by sharing some of these strategies and information here, everyone can see what is some of those important things that you can do to make sure that these transitions are as seamless and as successful as possible for our kids, especially our kids with really complex disabilities and healthcare needs. So there's a lot of added planning, and there's a lot of added collaboration that goes into having kids that have IEPs or on 504 plans and who have additional challenges and issues and needs as they become adults. So you're looking hopefully at the agenda slide at this point, and also forgive me as I multitask. I'll be looking at some of my notes, and I'll be trying to move through the slides with you. Hopefully I won't forget to click through as I babble away. But just looking at the agenda at this time, we're going to define the collaborative relationship. We're going to have a series of slides that talk about what families can do in the relationship. We will have another set of slides following that on what professionals can do. We'll talk about some of the barriers to family involvement, and we'll define the difference between family involvement and family engagement. And then we're going to go into some communication strategies, and then a little bit about what that means in secondary transition. And then finally, there will be several family engagement strategies, and those are geared towards what schools in general can do, but also how families can be active participants in making some of those things happen and making them successful. So I'm going to click into defining the collaborative relationship. So hopefully that clicked over. So the first thing that we want to do, we hear a lot in our office that people think that they're collaborating or they think that they have the strategies, and yet they're really not necessarily often putting them into place. And we'll get into that quite a bit, because some of this is going to seem like common sense, but it often doesn't happen. And I think a lot of times it doesn't happen because we come at things from different perspectives, and we're also working in pretty complex systems. We're working with a lot of people. I think our schools, obviously we have many kids in our classrooms and a lot of families to be working with. And families have their individual issues and agendas and goals in mind for their kids. And so sometimes it's hard to really get into collaborative relationships. But when you are in a collaborative relationship, it's important that they are built on the things that you see on your slide. They need to be respectful. They are only successful through development of mutual trust. There needs to be strong, open communication in which people know that they can speak and be heard. And there need to be some shared goals in any collaborative relationship. And so the goals for most of us in this case is about making sure that our kids have successful school experiences, successful community experiences that lead to good transition to adulthood. So I'm going to click the slide. So in addition to those elements, it's important that the collaborative relationship include that people are recognizing each other's perspective, and that we try to go through, when we go through the parts in this presentation of what families can do and what professionals can do, that really does hit on those different perspectives that we have coming to the table. So it's also important that parents are treated as experts on their children. We'll talk a lot about what professionals know. Professionals often, they're experts in their work. They're experts in content or in instruction. But as parents, we know our children best, and we are experts in them. And whatever their diagnosis is, we're going to know that information better than anybody. So parents and professionals need to do different things to make these relationships work, but we need to be very conscious of these different things. So the next slide is just that families are important, and it really just reemphasizes that information right there that I just said, that families are the most important people in their child's life. We have to remember that when as parents, our kids are going to have a large number of professionals that come in and out of their lives. They're going to have different teachers from year to year. So the information, the consistency of that child and the family and the family's wishes and the goals to achieve success for the child is going to need to be communicated with each new person that comes into their life. And so we're going to be constant in our kids' lives. That's not going to change. We're always going to be a part of them. So recognizing that the family is the most important part of the child's life is critical to ensuring good collaboration, especially if you're a professional and you know, I'm only going to be with this family for a very short amount of time. I really want to make sure that families are involved and participating and telling me about their child, and so that I can really know what's important to them. So the next two slides are just quite simply based on research that families play a powerful role in their child's education. And the slide after that is on just the research that shows that children do better in school, and that schools are better at educating children when families are involved. And again, we're going to get into what that looks like and what that really means, because we know these things. We know that we want family engagement, and we hear frequently from educators, well, our families aren't involved. We don't know how to get them there. They're disconnected. And oftentimes that might not be the case, especially as we're now getting into more of what the digital age with communication is changing, and the way families are involved and the way they're working often behind the scenes, especially in those older grades. We know that we see parents less physically at schools or physically in classrooms, volunteering or having those maybe day-to-day conversations. I know that when my kids were in elementary school, I spent a lot of time at the school. I had one-to-one conversations with teachers outside of conference, just how's their day going, those kinds of things. You're much more actively involved. By the time they get into the middle school and high school ages, maybe I'm having more communication with email. So, or I'm just getting information that's coming back and forth from the school. I might be very well involved in my child's education, and a professional may not be aware of how that's happening. So making sure that it is happening, or at least clarifying that it's happening in other ways, is what we'll be kind of discussing. So that brings us to the parent involvement versus family engagement slide. So parent involvement is, these are both sort of little buzzwords that we hear about quite a bit. But there's actually a difference between the two. But I want to point out that there's absolutely nothing wrong with parent involvement versus family engagement. So parent involvement are more of those random acts. Parents are involved, like I just said. I am up at the school. Maybe I'm involved in elementary school in the school carnival or an event that's taking place. Maybe I volunteer on occasion in the classroom. And then you'll see there's other things there in parent involvement where it says compliance. There's no infrastructure. So maybe a school has a parent involvement policy. If they're a Title I school, for instance, they might have a parent involvement policy. So they're complying because they have a policy, but they might not really have good family engagement going on. Again, there's parent involvement in these small activities or through volunteerism is excellent, but also really learning how to engage families. Families that are engaged in their child's education. You know that they are, it's systemic. We have families on focus groups or in the development of policies. Families are active participants frequently and over time. And they are knowledgeable about the instruction. They're knowledgeable about what's being taught in their child's school. And they are, they're sharing with other parents on being engaged and really taking pride in their child's school. And I'm really focusing on education here, but I think that you can see where this type of engagement is equally as important with some of our other professionals that we see. So maybe we have doctors' offices or therapists who actively engage families in their practices and getting feedback from those families on what's working and what could be improved. And so that's really family engagement and family involvement, and the difference between the two, even though they frequently get thrown around as interchangeable words. So again, you're looking at the family as interconnected. It's an interconnected system of the whole school and community system. So the child is the focus, but really engaging the families is the best way that we can ensure that our kids are connected to both school and community. And we'll talk when I get to the actual transition portion of this about why that's so important to have our kids involved in our communities as well. And it's also as important for schools and communities to be connected to each other so that they can create even events or activities that involve both for the student and the family, so that it's not just siloed where my child goes to school and then we do things in the community. We're an interconnected system that creates successful education and employment opportunities in the future when we know we're an interconnected system. So now we're going to get into some of the things that parents can do. And I have some notes, so I'm going to want to take a look at some of this so that I don't miss out on anything. There's going to be, I think, about 6 or 7 slides on what parents can do. And these are all very important. I mentioned about perspective earlier, but on this slide, you'll see there's something that says, consider the professionals may be limited by the system in which they work. Parents need to realize, that that's not any sort of never an excuse, but recognizing the perspective that a lot of professionals have very large caseloads. They may deal with funding issues. There are policies and rules that sometimes may seem frustrating for parents, but if we can take a step back and know that our role is to really have the perspective, take in that perspective of where we're all coming from if we're really going to collaborate. We have to be sure that we're willing to listen to other perspectives. We have to know that professionals have that expertise. And one thing that's really important is really truly the thanking professionals who are helpful. Let them know that what they're doing is meaningful, and because that goes into what works. And so when you can tell somebody thank you for what is working, you can actually help identify things that can improve collaborative relationships and systems with others in the future. You can even use that as a model of, well, over here, at my school, one story that I had in elementary school, I had a school counselor that absolutely supported me continuously, knowing some of the real significant struggles I was going through with one of my kids. And she came to me several times and said, I know this is hard for you. I recognize you're going through some tough stuff here, and let me know if I can support you, or let me know how I can help you. And it didn't really matter whether anything happened or not. It was the fact that she came to me and told me that. And I just told you how old my kids are, and I've been telling that story for years now. She really made an impact on my life simply because she was there, and she said she was there. And I thanked her for it, and I continue to thank her this way because it changed the whole dynamic of the communication and relationship truly with even everybody else in the school, because I knew I had somebody that was working with me and on behalf of my child, who cared about our family. And that actually creates a little bit of a ripple effect to the other people in that same system. When you've got a positive relationship happening here, it can really get into it. It can translate into other people in the relationship. It makes the relationship feel good, especially when at least 2, 3 people at the table are all working together. It can get rid of any adversarial feelings that might be happening when you're in a challenging situation. So another thing that parents can do, reinforce at home what a child is learning. So that might be difficult, but when you get to we'll get to what the professionals can do. If we don't know what the child is learning in school, it does make it hard to reinforce what they're learning at school. So when we get to that slide of what professionals can do, that really is an important part of collaboration. And especially, again, when we're at that transition age, when we're in high school, when our kids are working in 6, 7 different classes, and there's a lot of learning happening, and some of that learning might be stuff that we are not necessarily remembering so much from when we were in school, and the educational practices might not be the same either. So understanding and then reinforcing, ask those questions. I'm going to get to that in a second, but making sure that we're sharing that information with our kids. Also, keeping our conversations about our kids' schools or their teachers or professionals positive. School the more we frame things in a positive light with our kids, the more they're going to feel good about their experiences in that setting. So even when we are dealing with frustrating situations with our kids, with services, with education, whatever the case might be, staying positive with our kids will actually also help us to feel more positive, even if it's a challenging situation. Okay, so The next thing that parents can do is be considerate of the professional point of view. I already mentioned that parents know their kids best, and that professionals. I love the part that they say on here, that on this slide, where it says parents, professionals cannot know what parents have learned from experience, but the professionals that are in our kids' lives have worked with hundreds, if not thousands, of children in their career, and no two children are the same, certainly, but they have experiences as well with many, many kids. And of course, there's going to be similarities. So recognizing that while they might not know our specific situation, they are going to have a perspective based on their experiences as well. And professionals will, they'll come to know that parents are going to provide them with really good information about their kids that they've learned over with experience when there's a good collaborative relationship happening. Some things that parents can do early on, or even in older years, is give. Well, I would preface that with in the middle school or high school years, having student input on this is really important. But giving some maybe a one page or a snapshot of information about your family and your child, and not just their diagnosis and here are the symptoms, but here's what my kid likes, here's their interests, here are some of the things that really might trigger behaviors or frustration, or the things that they're shy, or they can talk if you prompt. If they're a nonverbal child like my oldest, she'll snow you for a while and let you think that she can't do something. So giving schools or teachers a little snapshot about your family and your child can really help, maybe at a meeting or at a conference, really help define your family for them and give them a better picture. And if you include your student in that process so that they have a part of it, then they know, I got to say the things that I like, and my teacher knows a little bit more about me as well, or a professional for that matter. So the other thing, before I go to the next slide, I think is important to think about when you're listening to this presentation and you have these slides. Again, it might seem like common sense, but if you take each of these, what parents can do, and create just a quick little checklist that you can use on occasion to go back and kind of remind yourself, am I doing these things? Especially if you find yourself in some difficult situations. Am I doing what I need to do in the relationship, in this collaborative relationship? Am I holding up my end of things, so that things don't become more difficult than they need to be? Sometimes we have to know when we're not acting the way we could be acting to help improve a situation, or just make sure that collaboration is occurring. So the next slide. Be honest. This is what parents can do, is be honest about what they don't know. And I recognize that, in fact, this came up at a meeting I was in over the last couple of days with some parents, where oftentimes there's a lot of conversation happening, especially in meetings where there might be more than one professional. So we'll take an IEP meeting, for instance, where you've got a team of people that are talking, and you're not really aware of all the things that they're saying. And so it's intimidating, and you don't ask questions, or you don't say what you don't know, and then people have moved on. And then there could become disagreements. But if you don't know and you don't ask, then it makes it really difficult to then have that good positive communication at that point. So parents really do need to put themselves out of their comfort zone, stop people when they're talking, and ask them questions if you're not sure. And never, no matter what the response is, I'll just tell you, there's no wrong question. So it's better to ask and be honest about things that you're concerned about or that you don't know, than to let that go on, because that's where relationships can often break down. Okay, so on the next slide, we are looking at honoring commitment, so following through with promises made. So we do we do hear a lot from professionals, and I mean frequently, that they feel that parents don't follow through. They're not following up at home. They're not communicating well with them. And so we really do emphasize that it is important that if we're being asked to do something with our kids, to help the classroom situation or to help them in a therapy situation, that we really are following through, because that builds that trust in the relationship that we talked about in the very beginning. But it also ensures that everything that's being done to help the child be successful is happening in both places. And so parents really do need to follow through with their commitments. Now, parents are busy. Everybody's busy, and things can sometimes sort of get delayed. And so you put things off and you put things off, and then pretty soon you realize, I have another meeting and I never did anything. I'm equally as guilty. I've had many things that I said I'm going to get that, I'm going to do that, and then I come to the meeting and I didn't. So it doesn't hurt for a professional to send a reminder in, a kind, quick little, maybe shoot an email. Hey, I know our meeting's coming up. Is this something that we need to postpone? Were you able to do any of these things? Do you need any help? Or, just little quick, nice, friendly reminders of how is that going, just to measure some progress, because, parents are probably not doing what they're committing to do because they're simply being defiant. They're usually dealing with other things that have come up, got in the way, or a number of different reasons. So, and then parents need to find solutions for disagreements. We teach parents frequently in advocacy trainings about how when we have something that's not working, we must have some sort of solution in mind for what would help make it work. Because bringing those solutions to the table and brainstorming ideas is a very important strategy in collaboration. If all we're going to do as parents is come in and offer up things that aren't working, or complain about systems, or complain about something without some sort of, here's what I think could help, how do you feel about this, or those kinds of conversations, then we get perceived as difficult parents. And so I think, and then again, that's where relationships can break down. And we really do have a responsibility to have some sort of solutions in mind when something's not working. And the other thing on this that I can't emphasize enough, I mentioned it earlier about being positive, but bringing our kids into disagreements, whether it's a school or with a professional in another setting, it's so important to not bring our kids into it, because it can really affect how they then perceive their education, how they perceive themselves, how they perceive their either their teacher or a doctor or somebody. Our kids need to be left out of those conversations, and as they get older, as they're in transition to adulthood, if they are involved if they're in student-led meetings, or their input is all valuable, then having them in those conversations in a meaningful manner is really critical. So we're not bringing them into contentious situations. We might just be giving them the same information that, here, we may be having a disagreement, but here's how we're going to find solutions. And there's no bad mouthing or those types of things going on. So it's just really important that parents stay as positive as possible in those situations. So, and then finally, one more slide on what parents can do, and that is that life is full of compromises. And so when I talked about brainstorming, that is finding sometimes compromise in situations. There are some times that we have to be able to say, okay, I'm willing to try something different, because you've got an expert opinion or expertise in something that you really think is going to work better for my child or could improve. their situation, and I'm willing to try something. And at the same time, are you willing to compromise and try something over here? And so you can really get into some good collaborative relationships if you're willing to be flexible. So, and then finally, nothing is written in stone. So even as let's say we've got our transition IEP, and we've got goals for post-secondary education, goals for employment, goals for independent living, and we can see that those are maybe maybe we don't have the right supports to achieve those goals, or maybe we're not making progress in a certain area. It doesn't have to stay that way. Nothing is set in stone. How many of us are doing exactly what we set out to do when we were graduating high school? Most of us have had a lot of changes in our lives. So recognizing that in these relationships, if we are flexible and willing to come back to the table and keep communicating, we can make changes and we can revise things as we go along. All right, so let's now talk a little bit about some of the things that professionals can do. So when we talked about parents keeping promises, this one, when we ask professionals to keep promises, we want them to please do what you say you're going to do. And then also we get into a little bit of confidentiality in this. We really, the respect and trust is built when we know that the things that we've talked about or the things that we've agreed upon are between us. Unless for some reason they need to be shared, or that we've agreed that there's other people that need to be brought into it. But when we know that professionals are speaking about us and our kids in a positive light, and that anything that's confidential stays confidential, it really does help build the trust in that relationship. I do, not to get into too many personal stories, but I did have a situation again when my kids were in elementary school that I was told that somebody in the school was talking about me and another parent to somebody else in the school, and it wasn't maybe in the most positive light, but it was unfortunately overheard by another parent. And so that parent then came back and told me some of what they overheard, and that really put it wasn't the most horrible thing being said either, but it was something that shouldn't have been discussed openly or in front of another parent who then could come back and tell me. It really hurt the relationship. So professionals, just please remember, even when you're sharing among other professionals, think about keeping information confidential. So move to the next slide. So other things. Be hopeful and honest about a child's abilities and potential. I have a whole training that I like to give on having high expectations for our kids. We need to believe in their future. We need to have hope for them, no matter what they're going through, no matter what their issues might be in that moment. We need to have those high expectations for kids. And when professionals have those high expectations and are hopeful for a child's future, that translates back to the parent. The parent can, that is felt in the relationship. When I know somebody believes in my child and believes in me as a parent and believes in the family, I know that my kid is going to have more positive experiences and achieve better success than if I think somebody doesn't have hope in their future, or if they flat out tell me she's probably never going to do these things. That takes away my hope and my expectations, and then that ultimately falls on the child. And when we lower our expectations for our kids, they will lower their expectations for themselves. And so we want to all have hope and positive thoughts towards their potential, and they will rise to that occasion. I've seen it happen. I've seen it in all three of my kids, and it's pretty amazing when you've got professionals who are really cheering them on and believing in them as well. So I think too, admit if you don't have answers, if you're a professional, if you don't know something, we just talked about parents not having answers or not knowing something, but we need to admit when we don't know something as professionals as well, and ask for the parents to, let's work together to find some information on that. And I just checked the time, and I know we got started a little late because of the sound issue, but I think I've got just about 15 minutes, maybe a little bit more, so I'm going to have to speed up. So, other things, parents can help identify, professionals can help parents identify their strengths. Okay, I'm told I can go longer, so I'm not gonna do my racing voice. So, hopefully you all can stay on and listen longer as well. So parents or professionals can help parents identify their strengths. So it's important that when a professional is working with a family, and let's say it's a discouraged family, they might not even realize some of the things that they're already doing that is helpful for their child. Pointing that out, like I said, the counselor, when the counselor said to me, I know you're having a hard time, what can I do? I know she also said some other things to me of, I love what you're doing. I know how hard you're doing this with your child. I know some of the things that you're working on at home. I know how much, you resource it, or you research information for resources. You always bring us information, and that's great. So when you point out that that's a strength in the family, even when they're having a hard time, again, that is something that can really benefit the relationship. And again and again, it might seem like this is common sense, but I don't think you're surprised to know how often these things don't happen in connecting with families, just because of the time constraints, really. We're busy, we're trying to get through meetings, we might just have short opportunities for communication. And so things like this get missed in pointing out strengths, so that families can feel more positive about where they're at, no matter what their situation might be. So other things that professionals can do, helping families identify their choices. I know so often we hear from families that I don't know what to do. And families often don't know what they don't know. So helping them know that there are choices and giving them choices in, along with those brainstorming activities. Well, we could try this, or we could try that, or what are your thoughts on this? Instead of just saying, well, this is what we plan to do. And again, time, and I think oftentimes professionals are, well, let's look at it this way. You've got 6 IEP meetings in the morning, and you're trying to get through each of them quickly, and still making sure that everything on them you're in compliance, and needs are being met. It's hard to have that time to really brainstorm and offer choices in the goal planning, or what families can do outside of that goal planning. But really stopping, taking a step back and saying, all right, here's what we're looking at. What do you think about this? That can really improve the relationship. It also really helps parents feel that they are actively participating in their child's education or in other health settings. So, and that goes right to the next slide, which talks about helping parents be viewed as equal partners. Parents must view parents as equal partners in any setting. Again, this just goes right back to, because this is their child, and we're all on the same team for that child. So when parents are viewed as equal partners, then by professionals, then parents feel that we're all in it for the same reason. We're not in it for one perspective only. We're all in these collaborative relationships for the benefit of our kids, to help them be as successful as possible. We have to keep the focus on that child, recognizing that parents are equal partners. So, and that I didn't say on the last one, I talked earlier about parents being flexible and having, recognizing other people's points of view, especially when things when there's disagreement. I think that it's really important that parents are heard by professionals even when even when professionals are disagreeing with what the parent is saying or what they're proposing. We need to feel heard. Parents need to feel heard. So please remember to try to be flexible and listen. And we'll talk about that in communication as well. So additionally, this just goes further into that. I think we've already talked about some of these things, but supporting parents to be their best advocate in decision making. This is these things on this slide right here. So considering the parent's perspective, reinforcing their strengths, and supporting parents as their child's best advocate. These are the things that really help parents get involved, get their students involved. So one of the things that I've talked about quite a bit for the last year is, as far as education goes, is strength-based IEPs. And you see strengths a couple of times in, identifying parent strengths, identifying student strengths. So we're talking quite a bit in our office about developing strength-based IEPs that really focus on the student strengths and advocating for, helping students advocate for themselves. So helping parents and students advocate for themselves leads to better opportunities for students to actively be involved in their own planning for their future early on, whether it's in elementary school or middle school or high school. When professionals support parents in advocating for those decisions, they are more likely to have their students involved in the planning process as well, which improves the whole relationship and really sets the student up for success in transition to adulthood. The more a student is involved in their own planning, especially by middle school and high school, the more successful they're likely to be when they leave the school or the education system. As opposed to, we see often students haven't been involved at all in any of their planning as they go through school, and then it's kind of a rough stage as they hit that now I'm an adult and now I'm not sure what's going to happen in adulthood. So collaboration and really supporting parents to help their students be a part of their own planning is part of successful transition. And then this is just a really simple slide, just taking care of the logistics so that parents know where they're going, what they're doing. Is it at a time that's convenient? Are you having meetings that are in a location that is convenient? Making sure that all of those logistics are set up so that the stress is off of the family, and making sure they are timely. I would go so far as to put this more in the professional, not education, but more of your community services. So doctor's appointments, therapists, specialists, those types of professionals that are working with our kids. Make sure that those, if a meeting is set, that it's happening on time as much as possible, or if parents can be notified if something's going to take, not happen as it was scheduled to happen. It can really reduce stress. And when those logistics are all in place, again, it just creates for a better meeting, better collaboration between each other. I know if you're walking into a meeting, you don't know where you're going, you're not sure if this is the right room, and then people aren't on time and you're stuck waiting for whatever reason, all that does is start to build the stress. And so by the time you walk in the room, you're already now you're that frustrated parent, and you can feel the tension in the room, and it just gets everybody off to a bad start. So as simple as this is, just take care of logistics and take the stress off of the family that way. Next, and that is, this is so important. I mentioned in the very beginning, if schools can have focus groups or advisory committees, how do you have parents actively engaged in your school? Are they participating on in policies on beyond the PTA or the PTOs? All of those are great, but are they doing more than just fundraising? Are they actively participating in and collaborating in school or community settings as equal partners, and is their voice being heard. So I love that this also talks about involving parents in staff development. I've had times in the past where I've been asked to come in and talk to way back when incoming service coordinators about what families experience and what they need, giving that family perspective. So inviting your parents to come in and give perspective to other staff. This is, maybe it's a specific diagnosis. Maybe it's something like, maybe you want to know more about a mental health condition. So my youngest, I mentioned, has mental health diagnoses. We have a strong set of knowledge around reactive attachment disorder. That might be something that as a community provider or a teacher for that matter, a school, maybe you want to understand that condition better. Bring the parents in. Their parents are happy to talk about their kids, and they're happy to talk about their kids' diagnoses and share that information. I think that is part of collaboration that is often missed. If you, it's a great way to get parents really feeling involved when they can share that information. Then they know that their child is going to be better supported, and maybe their family is going to be better supported as well when they know everybody's on board and they all have that information. It kind of goes back to that earlier thing that I talked about having a snapshot about your child, but this takes it a step further in that you're really involving them in sharing information with other staff and feeling like, okay, lots of people are now on board. This is great. So that's an excellent thing people can do. Okay, so the next couple of slides are on barriers to involvement. So all of those things that we just talked about oftentimes aren't happening, and those are the things that create barriers. So when we feel that there's a school involvement or a school environment that doesn't support family involvement, or doesn't maybe has policies or rules set up that actually even causes a disincentive to family involvement. I had a situation at one point where we had a school that decided that they didn't want parents coming into the building in the morning at all, and they also really discouraged any parent volunteerism in the classroom. They felt it was disruptive, and so that can create an environment where parents don't feel that they're wanted or involved at all. And then on the other hand, we have schools that are begging for, we just want more parents to come in. And so, and then parents have their own barriers as to why they're not involved. So really just recognizing what some of those barriers might be. Childcare constraints are one that we hear frequently. If they've got more than one child and they want to be physically involved. I don't want us to think that parent involvement is only physically, or parent engagement is having parents physically at our schools. That is absolutely important, or in other community settings. But it is also important to realize that there are other means of collaborating and communicating that don't involve that physical involvement. But when it does, childcare constraints is really a big issue that we hear about quite a bit. Or having kids in different schools. So trying to be, I think a couple of years ago when my 3 kids were all still in school, all 3 of them, I had one in a middle school and one at one high school and one at another high school. So it was really hard for me to be actively engaged in all 3 of their school environments, especially if there was an event happening. So especially or a party or something like that. So recognizing that there are barriers, and we've got to find other ways to connect. So, and then the last bullet on this slide is probably one of the most important things that I would say, especially to early elementary age or early childhood educators. No fault of your own. When we're talking about transition to adulthood, one of the things that has been brought up often by educators to me and to others, and it keeps coming up, is that it's so hard to get parents involved when their kids are in high school. They're non-existent. We just can't get them involved in anything. And so the part of what has happened often is if a parent has had a negative experience early on, it's really hard to get them back and get them involved if there's not been an ongoing, trusting, respectful relationship. If they had something happen early on, it's really hard to even develop a good, trusting relationship maybe the next year. Because it maybe, in second grade, we had a big disagreement and nothing went well and lots of negative meetings. And it's really hard for that parent to come in third grade and say, okay, I'm on board and I'm ready to trust everybody and be involved in my child's education. So there can be a pattern that begins to be set right away once a negative experience has happened. So really, if there is a negative experience, how do we how do we build those bridges back again so that a parent can get back involved and have that good, trusting relationship, so that by the time they're transitioning to adulthood, they are still very much involved in their child's planning and future with the professionals that are involved in their systems. Okay. So other barriers. There may be cultural differences. There might be language barriers. And I've certainly seen quite a bit of that in our office when we have families that English is not their primary language. There's obviously sometimes problems in communication, especially when you need interpreters, where it's hard to build those good, trusting relationships sometimes that way. There may be, this is in Idaho, we have we're a very highly rural state, a frontier state. And so we have a lot of families that are living far and few between from their neighbors, that miles apart. And we have high levels of poverty, and parents are working more than one job, or their lack of involvement is quite frankly down to, I've got to get my kids fed today. I've got to get to work. I'm working 2 jobs. I might have transportation issues. We've got to meet our basic needs. And so this is the last thing I have time for, to go to a meeting or to an event or something like that. So it may appear that they're not involved when they would like to be, but there are other things that are creating barriers. Another barrier, right back to the feelings of inadequacy. So if I don't feel like I understand what's being said, or if I feel people are talking over me, I'm probably not going to want to go be very involved if people are speaking in a way that I feel like I'm being talked down to. And I do hear that a lot from parents. They feel like they're being spoken to like they don't understand, and even if they don't understand, they want to be spoken to in a respectful manner. But that can create a real barrier to involvement. We don't really have a lot of inner city issues in Idaho, so but parents really discuss quite a bit of just not a lot of time. And I am the shoemaker with barefoot kids, because I have been equally as guilty of saying I don't have time, because I work a lot. But I do. We've got to make time. We've got to find time to use new ways of connecting with each other, which I'll get into in some of these strategies. But one of the most key strategies that I think is important today is technology. Using technology in ways that help families and professionals feel connected to each other, even when we're not seeing each other physically. And we know that by and large, most everybody in today has at least a smartphone or a phone for texting. And so if nothing else, that is one way to overcome a barrier, is to connect through using technology. And then involving the uninvolved. So some of the practices that are being used are on your slide here. And these are just really reaching out, making a personal contact. If you know that you've got parents that are simply not involved and not responding, it's critical to continue to find innovative ways to reach out to them, offer ways for them to be involved. Making that personal contact, I think, is really a simple yet highly effective way for parents to suddenly feel that they maybe are missed, that, wow, somebody cares. And I'll take that back to that same school counselor that I talked about earlier. I, at one point, had decided to homeschool one of my kids, and I got a call in the middle of the year from that same school counselor offering any support, offering, do you want to bring her in at any point for any testing? Do you want, would you like to visit? I wasn't even part of the school, and she made that personal contact and kept me with that positive attitude. So the next year, a year and a half later, when we thought, okay, now is a good time to re-enter the school system, I knew that we were thought of. So it's a great way to kept us involved, even when we weren't even part of the school. So making that personal contact is a great way. And then being persistent about the importance of a family learning environment. Really, truly improving families' abilities to be a part of their actual students' education. I don't know if it comes up in the slide, so I'm going to say it now, and then if it comes up, I won't repeat it. But I think that one of the things that parents really need more information on is actual instruction and content. And sometimes I've heard from professionals, teachers, that they don't think parents care about that, or they don't think that parents want that information. But I've heard many, many times that parents do. They really want to understand what's being taught and how it's being taught in their child's school, so that they can be involved and be supportive, even if it's something that they don't have experience with. For instance, I'm really not going to be the one to teach my kids algebra or beyond. I need a teacher who's qualified to teach that. But I want to know how that's being taught to my child, so that I can then say, okay, do you remember your teacher said this? And be involved in that process. So I guarantee I won't be able to support them if I don't know that. So involving families that way is helpful. Let's see. So some communication strategies. These are really common sense. Nonverbal communication is as important as the words we use. So how we're interacting in an actual in-person meeting makes a real difference. That's both parents and professionals. If we're, as parents, if we're gonna come in and cross our arms and throw our manual on the table and we haven't said a word, well, we've communicated quite well what we're feeling already, and we're setting the tone in that meeting. On the other hand, if we've got professionals sort of looking at each other around the table, we can see when people are disagreeing, and maybe they're shaking their head and you don't realize it. So those can really be turnoffs in a meeting. People are going to start to, it'll break down the communication. So ensuring that our nonverbal communication is appropriate and positive and engaging will help create better meetings and improve attitudes, hopefully, in even contentious meetings. And then anything that can be included in writing is critical. We tell this to parents all the time. Your information, the more you have in writing, the more clear things are. So that goes even for our organization. I constantly tell my parent education coordinators, when you've talked to a parent, follow up with an email that clarifies your conversation. That way nobody says, well, I thought you said such and such, and I could have swore he said this and this. No, just clarify things in writing. Any conversation. I'm not talking formal. There are formal documents that need to be in writing, but informal documentation of what's transpired is helpful in keeping conversations going. It also goes back to that commitments that have been made. So are we remembering the things that we said we were going to do? Well, if it's in writing, then we've got a list of what we need to get done. Okay, additional communication strategies. I've already talked about the children should not be included in disagreements. And really it just boils down to disagreeing should not be disagreeable. I'm not going to dwell on that. I've mentioned it enough. So professionals should avoid jargon. There's a lot of acronyms in our world, and we throw them out like alphabet soup. And so we really need to remember that parents don't know all of the acronyms and the jargon. And even when I mention things like explain how you explain instruction or content, it still needs to be explained in a way that parents are understanding. I'll go further into professionals who are in the community providers, so physicians, clinicians. Wow, there's a lot of language and a lot of jargon and a lot of professional speak that can really easily go right over a parent's head. Diagnosis, treatment options, there's a lot of that. So just remember, clarify that what you're saying is being understood too. So if I were to say an IEP and I see a look on somebody's face, I'm immediately going to say that's an individualized education plan. Sorry, I need to explain what those things are. So, and then of course, anything should be in a parent's native language or preferred language. So, families, we're at a recap place at this point. So families know their children when they're with them, but not when they're, so our kids behave differently when they're not with us. And I know little kids to teenagers, they behave differently when they're not with us. They behave differently around other adults. And so, and professionals need to realize that our kids act differently at home. And a lot of times I've heard so many times over the years where parents have said, my kid is doing this at home, and professionals or teachers are saying, we don't see that. We need to believe each other. We need to, in order to support each other, we need to believe, yes, that's actually happening. Now, how can I support you? I don't see it in the school environment, or at least I don't think I do. But obviously, if this is happening at home, how are we going to support you and your child better so that so that you've got a good family support, and then that enhances the relationship when they know they're supported. And the same goes for parents, recognizing that they're not seeing those things at school. So how can you help them to understand what you need so that, let's say your child is having a behavior at home that is increased as a result of maybe something that's happening at school that maybe could be done differently. And while they're not seeing the behavior, they can at least recognize, okay, I could try this, and then hopefully that will help at home so that you aren't having those behaviors. That's really what that boils down to. Okay, so transition to adulthood. This is all transitions. I mean, we all transition to in different ways. We transition from early elementary school to middle school, and transition to high school, and then we have transitions throughout our lives, and that's a universal experience. But there's a lot that these relationships, this collaborative relationship, is critical to ensuring that all of our transitions are with as the least amount of stress as possible. So, this really is the recap, but students and families, this part right here where it says students and families need to become knowledgeable about the many factors which contribute to successful entry and adjustment to adult life. That doesn't happen unless we've got all of these all the communication and collaborative relationships happening all along the way. That we don't just magically turn 18 and become adults and have all the tools in our toolbox to now just know what we're supposed to do. It is through these relationships that we develop resources, we understand each other, we communicate, and then we know what needs to transpire in that 18, 19, 20, all the way up to 25, or whatever the case might be, to help our kids have the best transition. Oops, I went too far, I think. Well, I can move on to because I've already explained starting early. So families can provide experiences and make community connections. When I talked about schools and communities connecting, it's our families. We're out there in the community, and we are the ones that our kids are in the community with us. And so we've got all those connections. It's that we can help our schools recognize. So a good example of that are especially kids that have, let's say, 504 plans. I hope people on the phone or on the webinar know what that is, but it's an accommodation plan. for students with certain disabilities that need accommodations to access their education. So a lot of those kids can get missed in transition planning as opposed to children who receive special education services. So, or have IEPs, education plans, individualized education plans. But one of the things that I had a real good connection with in the community with my child who was on a 504 plan was an understanding of vocational rehabilitation services. And so her school had not identified her as somebody who would benefit perhaps from some of the services that Voc Rehab provides. But I have made those connections in the community, and I was able to go to the school and Voc Rehab and to the counselor at the school and say, you know, can we make a connection here to help my child with her employment skill building and educational post-secondary education opportunities and those kinds of things. So families are really critical to bridging some of those gaps, I think, in knowing how to help schools or professionals know what's in the community that could help benefit their student as well. And then obviously the more experiences that youth have, the more they are going to understand themselves, grow in their skills, develop confidence. So we need to, when I talk about starting early, as far as transition to adulthood goes, when we're providing experiences with the end goal in mind, that we all want our kids to grow up to be successful, whatever that looks like for them, as independent as possible. You know, we need to provide them as many experiences in the community as possible. Again, we don't wait till, oh, now they're 16, we're going to suddenly plan for transition. Have we done anything? What are the things that we've done? Have we given them opportunities to volunteer, or whatever their ability level allows them to do to be in the community? My youngest went to the Boys and Girls Club after school, and that actually turned into a job. This summer, they offered her a job in the kitchen. So she's been saving for college as a result of that experience. The job came about because she was volunteering. She was there anyway, so she started volunteering in the kitchen and helping with the young kids, and then they offered her a job. So we need to be looking for those great opportunities that our kids can have in the community to develop those skills. Okay, so family engagement strategies. These are, I've mentioned many of them, so I'll probably just kind of go through them and leave you with a big list. These family engagement strategies are a little different than the parent-professional collaboration. These strategies are really a long list of things that schools or professionals can do to sort of think outside of the box on what can we do to get parents more engaged and more involved, that goes beyond just sending something home in the backpack or the newsletter or having a school fundraiser. We got a lot of other things that are listed here, and this really is geared more towards professionals on these next couple of slides. However, I think that parents need to be aware of these are some things you can ask about. And I've already mentioned some of them, such as what's the instruction look like, what's being taught. Ask, find out, research, call our office. What are the core standards for students? What assessments are being used and how? Again, I think a lot of times professionals may not think parents need this information, or they might not want that information, or they don't understand the information. And in some cases that all might be very true. However, the opportunity needs to exist. And parents, if you're interested in these things, just say so. I think educators welcome parents who are wanting this type of information. They know that they're going to have better parent engagement as a result. So now there are a whole bunch of best practices here. Oh, I should move us forward. Best practices by category. So I'm just going to quickly read the categories, and then the next several slides, which I'm actually not going to go into because you have access to them and you can look at them. They are simply activities that you can do that fall within each category. So those categories these are best practices for family engagement. So creating a welcoming school climate, providing families information related to their child's development, and creating supportive learning environments. establish effective school to home and home to school communication. So what did I say? That might not be just something sent home in the backpack. Effective, it might be you've got an email system, you've set up text communication systems, you've got individual classroom communication happening. Strengthen families' knowledge and skills to support and extend their children's learning at home and in the community. There's some activities in there like holding workshops, having trainings. You could invite Idaho Parents Unlimited in to provide trainings to families. We have something like 30 different training workshops that we offer on a variety of subjects. So that's all listed in the individual activities within each of these categories. And then engage families in school planning and leadership, which I mentioned earlier, getting them involved in policies and focus groups, and then connecting students and families to community resources that strengthen and support the students' learning and well-being. So as you look at the next couple of slides, you can see you've got a whole list of things that you can do in creating a welcoming school climate. Next slide. Here are the things that can be done in providing families information. And of course, nobody needs to get overwhelmed with the list of things. These are just best practices and activities that you can adopt and look into. And parents, absolutely look at these lists and say, I would love it if my school were doing this, or I would love it if my primary care physician did this. So especially if you've got or a therapist or something like that, there's ways to communicate better with them. So the next one is effective school and home to school communication. How does that happen? And recognizing that, again, while not every family may have access to the internet, especially in a lot of our rural communities, I just spent the last 2 days in Garden Valley with almost no internet, and we all went into panic mode, not knowing how to function. But a lot of families don't have internet, and a lot of families choose not to have use technology in that way. So finding what is effective for your families and your communities, and families also helping your schools or your professionals know what works best for you is a great way to improve those relationships. Strengthening families' knowledge and skills to support and extend their children's learning at home. You've got another list of things there. And then engaging families in school planning and leadership. Here are some ways to do those things, how to establish those groups. And then finally, connecting students and families to the community. And this is probably one of the most critical, these are the more critical activities towards ensuring really successful transition, because your kids they're going to be adults and they're going to be in the community. And then finally on this last, almost last slide, in the strategies, we developed these best practices are, there is I'll get a copy of a link on this that I can get for families or professionals, but this is in strategies for low income schools, families who are living in high poverty areas. And so those are really great strategies there, offering language classes, offering continuing education for parents if possible, doing business partnerships, and then how we talked about using text for custom apps. And then also too, even though it's not listed on here, I would also suggest that if you're looking at rural communities or low-income communities or parents who are stretched really thin, home visits when possible, and methods of transportation, maybe getting people to carpool to meetings or events at community centers is also a good strategy to get people involved, because transportation is a real issue in Idaho for a lot of people. So last, where to begin? I basically just have said, don't try everything at once. You can't, nobody can possibly do all of this at once, but these are tools and in your toolbox and strategies that can really help improve collaboration and improve relationships and improve parent involvement, and then ultimately lead to student success. So I hope this was helpful. The final slide is my contact information. I don't know if we have any questions, but I want to just say thank you for allowing me to spend this time with you, and I apologize for going a little over. But you can definitely contact our information if you have other questions, and see if we have any at this time. Any questions? No? Are we done? That is that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
And Angela, I just want to say thank you. I think your information was really practical, supports a lot of the work that families are trying to do, and definitely understanding both perspectives for the professionals to better understand kind of what parents are experiencing, and at the same time for parents to recognize that some of the challenges, limitations that the professionals are working with. So I hope you'll come back and join us.
Yeah, I love it.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
In the beginning, I think we may have missed, I just wanted to remind everybody that coming up in May, we're going to be doing the third annual panel for kind of the Jeff D. Youth Empowerment Services, and we hope you will join us for that. The panel is going to consist of Howard Beladoff, who is one of the original attorneys from the lawsuit dating back to 1980, Pat Martell, who is the project manager, two parents, Vanessa Morgan and Linda Miller, who've been very involved in the YES development. So it is going to be on a Tuesday this time, Tuesday, May 2nd, I believe. So please join us for that, and we look forward to seeing you all in May. Thank you much.
Thanks.
Mhm.